Hi there, I'm Frank Crenshaw. Welcome to Frank's Plastic Modeling page. This is my episode 4 on building Eduard's P-51 and 1/48 scale. In the last episode I talked a little bit about how I was going to proceed with painting, and I talked about painting the wings first, and it turns out I'm not going to do that. It turns out that I'm going to be doing the fuselage first, and the reason I'm going to do the fuselage first is I need to do lots of different layer work on the fuselage, and I don't want that to interfere with a masked wing. Painting the wing will be very simple. It's just going to be painted silver. So once I'm done with the fuselage, I'll just paint the wings, and that'll be done. It'll be very simple. So I did decide to actually paint the natural metal first. As you can see, I've got my natural metal coat on here, and I'm very pleased with how it turned out, though in the process I did wind up breaking my front canopy off. Not a big deal, I'll just have to repair that. But as you can see, all areas are shiny metal, and they're not, they're not boring. They're kind of busy. They have texture to them. They have a sort of organic look, if you will. It looks like metal. It doesn't look like paint. How do I do that? I do that by starting with the basics of modeling. And the reason the basics are super important when doing natural metal finishes, if you have any errors at all, they will be greatly magnified by the natural metal finish. So if you leave some glue, or you don't sand some excess sprue off, or if you just are careless, you could have this beautiful shiny finish that will just have this glaring, awful basics flaw that just stands out like a sore thumb. I've heard people mock basics and basic skills, and it's not something to be mocked. You should pay attention to the basic skills. Basic skills will help you build better models. They aren't the most important skill. In fact, they're rather basic. They're by definition. But if you ignore them, everything you do after is almost useless. If you take a model such as this lovely Eduard kit, and you ignore the basics, and you don't fill your seams, and you leave all those gaps, as I've shown, this kit has plenty of flaws in it, you are going to have a heck of a time convincing anyone it's a nice model. Except maybe yourself. But that just is my opinion. Basics modeling is very important, and since it's the first thing you do, you just really need to know how to do it. And that's what I feel like basics modeling really is. It's just a discussion for people who maybe aren't aware of what you're doing. The seam filling, the gap filling, the construction procedures, the laying out of paint, all these different things are very basic in modeling. But if you don't pay attention to that, anything you do after is fairly a waste of time if you don't do the basics right. That's why basics are important, and that's why I'll continue to suggest that basics are important. Not that basics make you a better modeler, but basics sure can take a good model and ruin it. All right, so how did I do this? As I mentioned before, I was going to paint it silver, and I always start my natural metal finishes off by polishing the heck out of the plastic. And the reason I do this is it's just super easy to paint over polished plastic. It's easy to get a shiny surface over a polished plastic. It's just the easiest thing in the world to do. You don't have sanding sludge that gets in the way, gets in your canopy, gets in your, you don't have any problems at all. It's just really easy to do that. I then put down a very, very thin coat of gloss white, Tamiya gloss white. And some people use black, but if you look at models painted natural metal that have a black base, they look very dark, especially if the paint is thin. If they put the paint on thick, it doesn't look dark, but then the paint's on thick. So the reason I use white is I want to be able to put the thinnest coat of paint I possibly can on this model and still have it look aluminum. And in my opinion, I think white is actually a very good choice for aluminum. It makes the model look rather aluminy, as you can tell right there. Maybe not. But this is a very thin layer of aluminum. Now the paint I used in this build was All Clad, and I used this All Clad I guess you can't really see the label too well, but it's polished aluminum. It's a very shiny, one of All-Clad's, high shine line. The only shade of silver on this model at the moment is polished aluminum. But if you notice, there are different shades. Here where the panels are different. If you look close, you can see some discoloration here and there. The reason that is because I use a base color, and in this case I start with this aluminum, and then I add different colors to that. And I use those to change the color of the base paint in layers. And the reason I do that is I have far more control over it than trying to do it using mixing colors and making sure they match. Often a mixed color will be too dark, too harsh, too contrasting, where just a little tiny bit of color mixed into the base color will change the effect just enough to give it a very realistic look. And I think I've captured that pretty well on this P-51. I'm very pleased with how this natural metal turned out. I really, really like how it's looking so far. And as I proceed to the next phase, I have a good, solid, hard natural metal surface. And that's really good. I want to kind of show you something. This is the natural metal finish on an SU-35 flanker model that I'm also working on, and I really need to get back and finish. It's almost done, but I want to super detail the landing gear, and I just really haven't got off my butt to do that yet. This is all painted in All-Clad. That's all All-Clad. Everything you see there is painted in All-Clad. And the very fascinating thing about it is all of it is this color. The whole thing. No other color was used in the process of painting this SU-35. You can see there's quite a difference in contrast. It's all over the place. There's blues and grays and browns, and it's a very realistic looking natural metal. Actually, if you look at a real one, I spent a lot of time staring at these things to figure out how I was going to do it, and I'm really happy with how it worked. But how I did that is the same as how I do every natural metal finish I do. I use a very glossy silver base. In this case, I happen to have a whole bunch of this polished aluminum, so that's what I'm using. Their high shine silver would work. Anything that's very glossy, that would also work. But the key is to put it on in super thin layers and be very careful, to not run it into itself. You don't need to buy 16 different types of paint to paint this. There's probably 30 different colors on here, but they were all hand mixed. I don't know if you can see. I'm going to try to zoom in. But it is subtle. It is very subtle, the little differences you can do just by adding a drop or two of brown or black, yellow, green. I mean, red. You can, the possibilities really are endless. You just need to experiment, and it's really easy to get to a point that a finish like this is it's really not that hard to do. The paints and equipment we have available to us as modelers these days are just outstanding. And my favorite airbrush that I've been using is this Infinity with the super fine needle in it, the 0.15 needle. This thing will spray so fine of a line, it's just unbelievable. This is a fantastic airbrush, by the way. I have no problems with this airbrush. So that's my update on my P-51, even though I'm showing off this SU-35. And just looking at it reminds me that, wow, I really need to get back and build this monster. This thing's turned out pretty good. Oh yeah, look at the gun shield. This is polished aluminum. Oops. That's all that is. It's the same polished aluminum. Just slightly different and put on in different layers. But anyway, it's amazing. It truly is amazing what you can accomplish with layering your paint and using these all-clad lacquers. So the next thing that I'll be working on this particular build, on this P-51, will be painting on the markings. The next thing that has to happen is probably that the markings need to be painted on. The main national markings. And here's my problem. I'm not sure which P-51 I want to do yet. And that's why I've left the tail off. There's two different ones that I sort of have in mind. One of which is a checker nose version, and it was flown by a pilot I met at a Nats actually, and I might do that. You know, it's marked similar to that big beautiful doll plane that we've all seen. The other one that I'm really leaning to right now, though, is a yellow checker-tailed from the Checker-Tail Clan sheet that Aeromaster put out years ago. Only I'm going to paint those on rather than do decals. So I'm going to sit down and I'm going to think real hard what I want to do, and then I'm going to pick one of those and go for it. And I guess we'll know next time what I pick. Thank you, and have a good day.